Dear listener, you are a wise, probably attractive person who loves Jesus. I know this because you have chosen to listen to the International Commission podcast. And people like you are our target audience. So congratulations.
You are our target.
And I know that you love to hear stories from the mission field. You like to be inspired. You like to learn and to laugh. And that's why you're listening. So we've got a treat for you today. Brooke, what are we going to talk about on this very special episode?
You know, I've never been greeted in such a way like that. I hope that one day I listen to another podcast that greets me like that. So I hope everyone is ready for some good things because you are good joining us.
We do our best to make you feel welcome and as valued as you should be.
Yep. All right. Welcome, everybody. We're very glad that you're here. Today, we're going to be talking some travel advice regarding fundraising for trips. And then Bucky's going to give us a few stories from the recent IC trip he took to Texas. And then we're going to be talking about the difference between USA trips, so trips here in North America, versus trips overseas with International Commission. All right, lovely people of wherever you are listening in.
Look in your rearview mirror and just say,
wow,
I'm a valuable person loved by God.
I am made in the image of God.
Yep.
And today's a good day. All right, let's start.
Take some advice.
When you go on a mission trip or you plan to work for a nonprofit organization, most likely you'll have to raise some funds for your trip or for work. And I know that this can seem like a pretty daunting task. It seemed like that for me whenever I was joining IC, whenever I even considered it. I knew, oh gosh, I don't want to do that because I won't have a steady salary, or I don't want to do that because of this, or I don't want to do it because of this reason. But we want to give you all some tips and advice for making fundraising or support raising an experience that is joyful and not dreadful, because, you know, it's really not a dreadful time. I have to remember that continuously because Bucky and I both support raise for our jobs. And we've also both gone on various mission trips where we have to raise support and we have to find funds. And it's not a horrible experience despite what any preconceived ideas you have about it. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about it. So a lot of the information we've gotten are tips from the book called The God Ask by Steve Shadrach, which is a really wonderful book. Not only gives spiritual advice and suggestion, but also practical steps and tips, which was really helpful for me whenever I was coming on board with IC. And, you know, it may not be necessary to read the entire thing for a short-term trip, but if you're planning on support raising for a job, you definitely should read the entire thing.
It's very helpful.
So let's go through maybe some steps first, and we can talk through some tips as well. So what have you got, Bucky? What are some steps you think people can take for fundraising? What are some thoughts you have on it?
The first is attitude.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily a step, but
step one, good attitude.
It is a good first step, really, is to pray about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you should pray is that God would align your attitude and your mindset about support raising with him,
right,
and with his. So one, that you can trust him totally to provide where he has guided you, and to find joy in inviting people to join you on mission.
Yep.
By helping to send you, because that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's much harder to raise support when your mindset is, I have this big expense coming, or that's going to be constant, and I need to go and ask people for their hard-earned money so that I can go and do this cool job while they're doing their regular real jobs.
Right.
And taking part of their paycheck and sending it to me.
Yeah.
That's not what's going on.
No, it's not.
But
I think we can have the mindset that we're going to offend people or I don't know. We just think way too much about the person than what God is really leading us to do. I
Yep.
think.
The other big attitude factor, I think, that's kind of hard to get over, but really essential to discover and then to believe is that the results of partner development, support raising, partnership, whatever you want to call it, the results of that are really not up to you or how good your presentation or your ask are. Now,
Right.
you should do a good job. You should be thoughtful about it. You should be prepared. You should be sincere, just like in evangelism. And in fact, the point I'm arriving at here eventually is that those are very comparable.
Yeah.
Evangelism and support raising are very comparable, especially when it comes to faith, because your job is to go and cast the vision, tell the story, make the ask, the invitation, and the person decides how to respond.
Right.
And in any case, we need the Lord to move in those people's heart to even catch the vision, to
Mm-hmm.
even align with the mission that you're telling them about.
Yeah.
And if they do, they may give. And you want it to be from their heart because you want their gift to be a joyful gift.
Mm-hmm.
And you want them to want to be part of your team and to be invested.
Yeah.
And you can't make someone feel that way
Yeah. No.
unless you're manipulating them, and then we don't you don't really want to do that. You want to cast the vision, tell the story, make the invitation, and see people say, yes, I believe in that. I believe in you, and I'm going to be a part of this. I
Yeah.
wish I could go, or I wish I could serve in this same way, but you're doing that, and my role is to help you. So those are the kind of partners you want.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes people will just write a check, and you know what? That's helpful too.
It
That's
is.
fine. I'm not going to turn that down. I
Yeah.
just would rather someone really catch that in their heart and
Mm-hmm.
want to be a part of it and want to hear your stories and want to hear your updates
Mm-hmm.
while you're there or when you get back from a trip or regularly if you're in ministry.
Yeah.
So just a mindset thing. Just from the get-go, kind of overall, anything that kind of follows so far as advice or tips or techniques, they're much more difficult to actually put into play if you don't have a good attitude
Right. I think
about
that is a good place to start. And yeah, I've known a lot of people that, yeah, they will go away from support raising because they have such a poor view of it. And I can understand it seems really daunting and it sounds really scary to have your salary, especially. I mean,
Yeah.
for a one trip, it seems a little less daunting. I'm going on
Mm.
one trip, you support me one time. But going to people and asking, hey, can you support me monthly for the foreseeable future? And it is a scary thing to have to do that. But, just like with any other part of our lives, even with salary. I mean, our salary at a regular job that's not a secure thing. You have no
Yeah, that's
idea.
not guaranteed, especially these days. People get laid off, companies
Mhm.
fold or get bought out or whatever. You
Yeah.
might get injured. You have no idea what might happen.
Yeah.
No salary really is secure.
No. And to kind of give another encouragement, I started support raising in 2020 whenever it was in the middle of COVID and we weren't even supposed to meet with each other. Thankfully, I was in a small town and nobody really cared that much, but still, it was a little bit daunting because I knew what if they've lost jobs or what if they don't want to meet with me? But the Lord really provided. I support raised very quickly, actually. I got to 100% in around 6 weeks. Not saying that that is the common thing
That's
or that
not
happens all
typical.
the time. Yeah, that's not typical. But again, if you look at the circumstances and you back away because of circumstances, then you can miss out on seeing the Lord provide in really amazing ways. And if you just go ahead with it and trust in the Lord, I mean, it's a lot of just trusting in the Lord. And if you know that the Lord has led you to this, then He is going to provide
Yeah.
and He's going to provide financially. And you'd be surprised the amount of people that are really willing to give. I mean, I remember support raising and I went to people, they said yes to meeting. And I did not think those people would be willing to support me. And they were very excited about it and really willing to jump on board. And so, just don't expect bad to come from it, because
Yeah,
it is really good.
don't assume the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, the reality is you may know people who do want to be more involved
Mhm.
in ministry, but that's not the assignment that they have from the Lord. It's not the call they have from the Lord, the specific thing that you're doing.
Mhm.
Maybe they really, truly are called to the business world, to the marketplace, and they are good at raising funds,
Yeah.
making money.
Yeah.
I just see it as raising funds because I see kingdom potential when
Yes.
with dollars, right? And their role is to support someone who is doing that other thing that maybe they kind of wish they were doing, but that's just not their role.
Mhm.
And that's how the kingdom works. You've
Yep.
got goers and senders. I think everyone should be a little of both. But you see that in the New Testament, of course. You see the model of people who were making money and supporting Jesus' ministry.
Mhm.
And then in the early church as well, they were sending support back and forth to the apostles or the different churches.
Yep.
And beyond the charity work, everybody, I think, is aware of how they were taking care of orphans and widows, but maybe less aware of how early Christians were supporting the furtherance of the gospel.
The gospel ministry, yeah.
And I say that because I was not aware of it either until I started raising support for IC.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of just the biggest first hurdle to get over is just your whole understanding of what it is and why we do it.
Yep.
And that it can be a privilege
Yep. Your outlook
instead of
and
just
your
a reward.
attitude.
We also get this idea in our minds that people that we're going to ask have been asked so many other things, and that they're getting hit up for donations from this and that and this and that. And we do have a lot of opportunities, especially now where we're constantly connected. We see all sorts of needs and opportunities. But the thing is, most people have not been approached by someone individually asking them to support a mission.
Mhm.
They just haven't. And so don't feel like you are sort of in competition with something else or someone else. This is probably a really unique ask that nobody has
Yeah.
pitched to them before. So what are
Let's
some practical steps and tips?
Yeah, I think that is a good place to start. We don't want to just talk about how you should act and not things you should do. And again, a lot of this is from the book The God Ask. But first, writing down a list of everyone you know. And this can look a little bit different if you're raising your salary versus raising for just one mission trip. So you might not need to write down every single person you know, but writing down a list of people you know. And it could be people back in college or people you haven't seen in years, just people that you know. Go through your Facebook friends and just write down some of those people. And then from there, narrowing it down to around the top 30 people that you want to go to first.
That you think might be most likely, or that you know better, or you don't have to reestablish the connection.
Yeah, or
much.
family, or people that are mission minded that
Mhm.
people in your church. And then from there, even breaking it up into groups of 10 from that 30. And so top 10 people that 100%, when I go to this person, they're going to give to me. And then from there, the next 10 will be people you think will probably give. Then the third 10, people you hope will give, but you're not sure. And these are the people that you want to make appointments with first. And so whenever we talk about making appointments, these are, the scheduled meetups of going and asking people to support you. And again, it might look a little different for a short-term trip versus salary. If you are doing it for your salary, you need to meet with people. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just something you need to do.
You are making a big ask, a big invitation. That's something very significant and serious.
Yeah.
And you want them to partner with you long
Mhm.
term. That warrants a face-to-face meeting, if at all possible.
It does. Yeah. So do you have any more on that, Bucky, just on kind of splitting people up or organizing?
I've been given this piece of advice many times, and that's just don't discount anybody. You
Yeah.
get down to the end of that list and you feel like, I just don't have any more contacts. I don't have anyone else to contact, it's probably because you do have some people that you just didn't go to. Either you were afraid for some reason,
Right.
maybe you don't think they're Christian and you feel like it'll be kind of weird and awkward to ask them to support your mission trip or your ministry role, or maybe you don't know how good of friends you really are. You haven't talked for a long time.
Yeah.
You're not sure how to start the contact again, or whatever the reason is. Don't discount those people because you don't know what's been going on in their life. Maybe they are a Christian now,
Yeah.
or maybe God has been moving on their heart to go into ministry, and you might be the spark that kind of opens their eyes to it, or whatever.
Right.
You just have no idea how God's going to work. But if God has put this opportunity in front of you and you are faithful to just believe Him and walk forward in faith, step over that fear and do that, you just don't know what's going to happen. Leave it in His hands.
Yep.
I've found that I've contacted some of those people and we're surprised that, wow, this person is following the Lord now. I didn't
That's
know. And
cool.
they were very excited.
Yeah.
So, and if they really don't want to talk to you, guess what's going to happen? They're just not going to get back to you. And
Yeah.
that's fine.
They'll ghost you, and that's
Yeah.
just check
So
them off the list.
it's really not all that scary. But don't discount anybody because you don't know their heart
Hmm.
until you ask.
Exactly.
You just really don't know.
Yep. Whenever you're going and asking people, going in person is really the best thing you want to do. Trying to meet with people in person as much as you can. It's harder for people to say no whenever you ask them in person.
That's true.
I think for the short-term trips, I think that I had a little bit easier time with just asking people and just telling them, hey, I'm going on this short-term trip. Would you consider it? Just through a text message
Yep. Text
or
message
a
or
letter.
or a
Yeah.
quick call.
Writing a
Or,
letter.
yeah, letters. People will respond to those.
Also, we have some resources available. If you need some help with writing a letter, we have some templates for you. And so, again, connect with us and we'll give you some information at the end to do that. But yeah, whenever you're support raising, going in person as much as possible is going to be the best way so that people can really see your heart and they can, see how God has been leading you throughout the years. It was really cool whenever I was support raising. It was a lot of people who saw me grow up. They saw the first time I went on a first mission trip and they saw how the Lord was working in my heart throughout the years. And just a few people, they told me, yeah, I knew that you would end up doing something like this later on. I just saw how the Lord was working in you, so I'm not surprised. And that was really cool, just seeing
Yeah.
how people were ready to support me, knowing that that's what they knew that the Lord was going to lead me to do that. And again, like you might have a complete change of heart. Maybe you were a completely different person when you were younger and you can tell people how the Lord has worked in you. And, it's really cool just getting to tell your story.
Yep.
And people want to hear it. And especially people who love you, your family, friends, things like that. And so, yeah, going in person and being able to really express that, I think is special. And you get to have that connection time. And it's really a blessing when you get to just spend time with people, share with them what the Lord's doing in your heart, ask them what the Lord's doing in their heart too. You can make it about both of you and what God is doing in different areas. So,
Yep. I have some ministry partners now that have been monthly partners since I began here at IC that were my youth leaders when I was in high school at
wow.
church.
Yeah.
And a couple of them said, something to that effect, similar to what you said. A couple of them said something like, well, I've been waiting for this to happen. I knew eventually God would move you into a spot like this.
Yeah.
So that was really cool that they could see that trajectory in my life before I did. And they were really excited to jump on board.
Yeah.
When you contact someone, you invite them to meet, you set up a time and you go and you talk to them. You, like you said, you share your story, talk about what God's doing in your lives. That's all great. And that makes it much more natural, but you need to take some notes, some kind of an outline, maybe even a presentation,
Right.
pictures, video, whatever, just to keep you on track and keep you focused.
Yep.
And also kind of help you with boldness, because sometimes even me, even now, 8 years into this, I can kind of chicken out, or I can have a good conversation and it's kind of hard to keep it going toward the point of making an ask, and it just keeps drifting away. And so I want to chicken out. You've got to have some kind of an outline you can pull the conversation back to,
Yeah.
and you need to practice making an invitation.
Yep.
Just because inevitably it's just going to happen. You're human. Point A, you're human. And point B, spiritual warfare is going to happen.
Right.
And you're going to forget what you wanted to really say, or you might get scared and chicken out. So having an ask that you can practice so you just don't have to think about it is really helpful.
Yeah. And also on the ask, we can get nervous to make that ask. It can, you've given your heart, you've told them what you're doing, exactly what you're doing. You tell them even how much you need to raise, and then you're just beating around the bush. Don't do that. You need to get to the point where you make a very clear ask, tell them what you're wanting from them, and then ask it. And then be quiet and let them think.
Quiet.
Just stop talking. If there is silence, let the silence be drawn out. Just let them, give them the respect that they need to be able to consider, and also just let the ball be in their court. You have made your ask, and so just let them wait. And that's another thing is give people a range. I don't always do that. It just kind of depends. But a lot of times whenever I was support raising, at first, I gave people a range of, what I was hoping. Give them a specific range, and then they'll think about it. They'll consider it. And if they can give more, they'll do that. If they can give less, they'll make that clear. And so how about we just do a little example? You be the asker, and I'll be the listener.
Okay. Mrs. Stewart, you know what the Lord is doing in my life and what he's calling me to. I'd really love to have you come on board as a partner. Right now, I'm looking to raise $4,000 to cover the expenses for this trip. And I want to invite you to give $50 or $75 or $100.
Sure. Yeah. I think that we can give you $100. We'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you. I'd be so grateful for you to help send me with that $100.
Yep. See, easy. That's how we
It's
get
not
it.
that hard.
Yeah. You just make that clear ask, and then you wait for a second, and then they'll be like, either sure, or they'll say, I don't know if I can give that much. I'll give you this amount. I can give you $25. Or a lot of times if you're meeting with a person who is married and it's just one person, or if it's both of them, they'll need to talk about it. I could say, well, let me talk to my husband, and maybe we can get back with you on what we're going to do. And so,
sure. Can I follow up with you next Tuesday at 9 a.m. or 1 p.m.?
Sure. Yeah, that would be great. 9 a.m. would be great. I'll have an answer by then.
So, and that's another thing. Setting a time for follow-up is very important, because many people will probably tell you, well, I need to think about it, or let me run the numbers, or let me talk to my spouse, or whatever. That's a totally valid answer. And don't assume that they're blowing you off.
Right.
They might really need to discuss that and pray about it and think about it. So give them that time, but set a time where you're going to be following up. It kind of gives them a deadline, sort of.
Yeah.
And also it puts your feet to the fire to actually do the follow-up.
Yes.
Because now they're expecting it.
Don't put that ball in their court then. Once you make the ask and they answer, you take that ball back out of their court, and you say, okay, can I message you back in a few days or by next week for the answer? Because if you say, yeah, just get back with me on that, a lot of times they won't, because they'll forget. Or
and life's busy. Your life is busy, so is theirs.
Yeah. And don't expect that they're just trying to blow you off. Sometimes people actually can, but for the most part, they're not trying to. If they've agreed to meet with you and listen to you, then a lot of times they probably aren't trying to blow you off. Again, a lot of times people are just really, really busy. And so just pull that back into your court so that it's in your hands to ask that question again, to follow up with them.
Another thing that I think is important to do is to follow up even after they have given, or if this is long-term, follow up with them regularly. Send a real life handwritten thank you note.
Yep.
Maybe even meet them again, give them a call, give them some kind of a summary of what you did on your trip or what you're doing, because people want to know what they're investing in.
Right.
And also, these people are probably excited to hear what God has done.
Yeah.
So you want to honor them with that and and thank them properly.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. That is something that I did after every single person said yes. I wrote them a handwritten letter thanking them. And this past, I send out Christmas cards to my supporters. I send out, email updates and telling them what's going on in ministry and in life because, they want to know what's going on in our lives
Yeah.
too. Doing that just so that it's not just a one and done kind of thing. And especially after, if you go on a short-term trip, people a lot of times will want to hear, how it went. If you are doing this for your job, making sure you try and follow up with it, and spend time with them outside of what you're doing. If you live in another country, if you're moving overseas, that's going to be a different scenario, of course, and they're going to understand that.
Yeah, you'll have to find ways to make little touches. Send a text.
Yeah,
If you're not good at that kind of thing, schedule it out.
right.
Just this week I'll text these 5 people. This week I'll text these 5 people.
Yeah.
And so,
Here's an idea I got from somebody who had moved to New York City, reaching a specific group of people there. They had come back to where I live. And he just set a time and he messaged all of his supporters and said, "Hey, I'm going to be at this restaurant from this time to this time hanging out with people. Come and hang out with me if you're free. There's going to be other people that support me there so we can hang out." I thought that was a brilliant idea, and I used it so that you don't have to make, especially if you have a group of people in one area. So I am from a small town, and I went to a small church in the town next to it. And so meeting with those people, it would be really hard to get with all of them individually because it's a few hours away from me. And so I did that same thing. I scheduled a few days. I said, okay, on Friday, I'm going to go to this town. On Saturday, I'm going to go to this area, and I'm going to invite them. Hey, I'm going to be at this coffee shop from this time to this time doing some work. I'd love to hang out. And then from this time to this time, I'm going to be at this ice cream place where we can just sit and hang out if you're free to come. And I told all the people that were in the area that were my supporters that. And some of them came, some of them didn't. And, they're just like, hey, I love that you invited us. We can't make it this time. And so I think that's something that I want to try and do once a year. You don't have to do it once a month. That's going to be a lot. But at least every once in a while, following up with them. And you don't have to necessarily tell them every single thing you're doing. Just ask them how they're doing. It could be a time where you are spending time with them and learning about them.
Make them know they're appreciated.
Yep, exactly.
What are some things that you've learned from support raising?
Some things I've learned is it was much more of a joy than I realized that it was going to be. There are a few times I was really blessed and encouraged leaving a support meeting. And God also provides in ways that I just don't expect. And I mean, even still, someone randomly sent me a ton of money just because, they said, hey, we support you in ministry and this is our way of ministry right now. It just shows me, and I think we can get into, again, we get into weird mindsets all the time. I think that I can get into, wow, I don't deserve this, but we don't deserve any good thing that the Lord gives us. And so I think just remembering that God loves to bless his children, and he reminds us every day that he is the one who provides. And so I think just it can really put my dependency on him of Lord, I need you. It's not even these people who are providing for me. It's you putting it in their hearts to do this for us. And so I think that, I think that's what I would have to say.
I totally agree. That's what I'm thinking too. This whole time I've been thinking about it and trying to rewind back like about 8 years ago when I started. Okay, I guess it was like 8.5 years ago that I started support raising for full-time ministry, and how scary it was, and how even though I'd read this book and I'd had these trainings and I heard what we have just been saying. I heard that, but I had not really believed it yet. I had not internalized it, experienced it. And so it was all really scary to me. And I was trying to have a good outlook and attitude on it compared to now, where I have seen God provide in so many faithful and unexpected ways, to where I still have a plan, but I also realize that God's also going to throw in some surprises here and there. And people will give without being asked. Other things will happen that are unexpected, like maybe a supporter will drop off, And those things, could be scary, or you can see them as God
Right.
doing something, and he's going to continue to provide if he's continued to call me
Hmm.
to his role. He just will. Matthew chapter 6 is all completely and totally true. And if we seek God's kingdom first and his righteousness, he'll
Yep.
add everything else. He really,
He will.
really will. And that's why I think it's such a great faith exercise to live
Hmm.
this way, totally dependent on the Lord and his body to provide for my
Yep.
family and ministry. And he gives us just
Hmm.
what we need, and he knows what those needs are. And I got to trust him with both of those. But he's never
Hmm.
failed me. And so part of my testimony has become how I've seen
Yeah.
God provide. And that really is part of the joy. And that's why I'm able to encourage other people to do this, either short term or long term, because I can tell you 100% now from personal
Hmm.
experience that God really will provide, and he really is faithful and good. I know that from the word. I can tell you confidently from his word, but also from my own
Yeah.
life
I have
experience.
a quick story and then we can move on to our next topic. But whenever Caleb and I had gone to Jordan back in 2022, we had to support raise for both of us, and I had already had some funds in my account, so that was good. And then our church decided that they would pay for half of our trip, which was amazing, and so I was very thankful that they had done that. And then a few other people gave randomly that I did not realize that they were going to give. And I was kind of wondering, I did not know how we were going to be able to pay for it all, but I knew that God would provide for us. And it was funny. I think that God wanted me to see just how exactly he provides what we need. And so my dad had given online. He was just a little bit short somehow, either through the credit card or something. And it was $12 off, and then I realized that I had only had like $12 left. And so just with everything, it just was a very specific amount to show me that he didn't know how much I needed left, and all the other people had no idea. And I think the Lord just wanted me to see how he was the one who provided exactly, and everyone else who gave what, out of the abundance of their heart. And so it's just really cool how God provides exactly what we need when we need it. So
Yeah. And he knows better than anybody what
he
exactly
does.
we need.
Yeah.
And he's going to do it.
All right, let's move on to
Yep.
the next segment.
It's story time.
Bucky just got back from one of our North American evangelism partnerships in the Glen Rose area of Texas. And so we want to hear some fun stories from the field. So go, Bucky.
I did. This was super fun because it was really the same format as our international trips, but here in the States. And so we had a team from, I think, 4 different states all come in to the Glen Rose and Granbury area of Texas, which most of you have no idea where it is, but it's kind of southwest of Fort Worth, Dallas and Fort Worth a ways. And it's only about an hour and a half from our home office. So a lot of us could drive there, and that was cool. But it also meant that the hosting churches were a lot of people who have been connected with IC since the very beginning of the ministry. Our founder's home church there was part of this partnership. And so people at their church had been doing Operation Andrew, praying for people that they know who need to know Christ, investing in those relationships and sharing the gospel with them, and setting up appointments to meet with them and visit them at their homes or workplaces or wherever. And that was really cool because that's what we do all over the world. And so for them to kind of be on the hosting side after being the visitor for so many years was really cool. But one thing about the churches that participated that were inspiring to me is that there were all different kinds and sizes of churches. Some were established First Baptist Church, some were house churches. One was even really a ministry to homeless people, and they meet together as a church. And some were fellowships that meet in care centers for the elderly, all sorts of stuff. But everybody was coming together
That's cool.
to share the gospel. And I just thought, that
Yeah.
was really cool. Different expressions of the body of Christ working together in the same thing, which is what we do all overseas. You just don't really think about the
Hmm.
diversity of churches in the US. One was a Hispanic fellowship as well, and
Nice.
they were really fun. I want to tell you about Pastor Juan. Pastor Juan and his wife Laura are very in touch
Hmm.
with their community, the demographics of their community, and where people live, what people do for work, their involvement or not in churches, family dynamics, all these sorts of things. They just know. And so it was fun to sit with them after the opening rally and hear Pastor Juan and Laura talking to their team about what they're going to do that
Hmm.
week and where everybody was and sketching out a map and explaining all of this. To me, I just thought that was
Yeah.
so cool to see someone who just
Hmm.
knows his community so well and is responding to it and using Operation Andrew as a tool
Yeah.
really to engage the needs and the lostness there. So that was awesome. So that was one church that participated, and that was Primera Iglesia Bautista of Glen Rose. And a few of our team members went and worked with them that week. And as the media
Hmm.
guy, I went and bounced around with different teams throughout the week. And we just kept hearing stories from this church. On that team, we had two Hispanic guys. One is an international student from Ecuador. Another is a guy from North Carolina. We had a lot from North Carolina, and we have some staff and partners there as well. And joining them was Siv Ashley, who's originally from Cambodia and has an amazing testimony of escaping the killing fields and just a lot of crazy stuff that happened in her life. And now she is just through and through a Southern belle, and it's kind of funny to hear her speak because her accent is a mix of Cambodian and
That's so
North
funny.
Carolina, and it's
Yeah.
fantastic. So to hear her tell any story is always entertaining, but she's also very animated and lively
Yeah.
and just loves people and is always excited about what she's doing, loves the Lord. So, all that said, some of us were able to get together at the end of the day and listen to their stories. So loved hearing the Spanish church's stories uh, because Siv would tell the stories with
Yeah.
so much emotion and animation and her fun accent. And one of them was that they had planned an outreach where they were inviting people from the neighborhood to a pizza party at one of the church members' houses. And for whatever reason, people weren't showing up. They expected a big crowd and almost nobody was coming. And they wanted to share a couple of their testimonies and present the gospel. And so they were disappointed that nobody was coming.
Right.
Well, one of the rules of a mission trip is you got to be flexible, right? Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. And you got to get creative. So Andy and Siv jumped into the minivan and drove around the neighborhood with the doors open, blasting music and inviting everybody they saw to come to this pizza party.
Yeah.
But Siv's version of it was a lot more entertaining. But just imagine in your head, there's the Latino guy and this Asian lady in the back of this minivan with the doors open, with all these pizza boxes, yelling at all the children and other
That
passersby
sounds,
to come to this
I
house for
know
free
that's
pizza. I
I
mean,
don't know if that's the
red
best
flag, anybody?
way to invite people, but
This could fit into the "was that the best idea" segment. Well, some people did come. They passed out some pizza just, to the people walking by and told them where they could go. And people did eventually show up. But I just thought it was really funny how
that's really
sometimes you got to be creative, and they decided to take up the
Yep.
kidnapper technique of
Yeah.
evangelism. I don't know. Sometimes when we didn't have specific home visits planned, like during the day, sometimes in our culture,
Hmm.
it's hard to have visits during the daytime because so many people work outside the home. And so we would go places
Right.
where people would be, and laundromats are one of those places. So this is something that I do from time to time as well, is go to laundromats and strike up conversations with people, offer to pay for a wash and talk to them while they wait for their clothes. So we were doing some of that. And it's
Mhm.
just amazing to see how people will open up in that situation.
Yeah.
I think it is some of the best ground to work for the gospel because it just
Mhm.
so happens that a lot of people that come to the laundromat have big needs in their life, but also most of us aren't used to someone just
Yeah.
asking sincerely, "What's going on in your life? How can I pray for you?" And so if you
Mhm.
give people that
Yeah.
opportunity, man, sometimes they'll just unload on you. You got to be ready for that. So that would just happen again and again and again.
Yeah.
People just tell us all these things that are going on in their life, some things that like I don't even
Mhm.
want to know about, but it was cool that they were open about it and kind of bearing their soul
Yeah.
and giving us an opportunity to share our testimony as well and just respond with the Bible stories, with scripture, with words of encouragement and hope, things from our testimony. And people were open to listen to the gospel. So it's just amazing. One afternoon, we came across a family, a Hispanic family. They were coming to the laundromat, and I
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I have doubts, Brooke, even though I've seen God
Yeah.
work so many ways, so many places. Sometimes I think they're not going to stop and listen to us. They're busy, they're going about their day.
Mhm.
Now sometimes there's just look, sometimes we have cultural divides. It's just the reality. There are three of us white dudes, and this was a lady, a teenage son, and a couple of daughters. And I just thought this isn't going to be comfortable. Maybe they won't want to talk to us. Well, we have a longtime participant named John Garrett, and this gentleman speaks way more Spanish than he will let on. But he's very confident in what he does know, and he knows how to share the gospel and have a conversation about the Lord in Spanish with a completely flat American accent. Okay. All love to you, John. I think this is amazing that you do this. But I kind of went over there and grabbed them and said the few things I know how to say in Spanish, small talk to start a conversation with them, and he went right into asking them about their life and asking if he could share a story with them, shared the gospel with them all in Spanish, and three of them
Yeah.
responded. I mean, this family,
Mhm.
I just think it's so cool to see a family come to Christ together. Like we see that in the New Testament, I see it in Asia at least a lot, and I just thought that was so amazing. And it just goes to show that you can't discount what God might do. You're faithful to be present, to be available, to share the love and message of Christ with people. You have no idea what he's going to do, and the
Yeah.
fact that we just happened to come across these people that were ready to hear and accept it was just amazing. More than that, this is kind of a small town, so this isn't all that uncanny. But we started talking about the churches we were working with, and one of them was Primera Iglesia, and of course, she knows somebody who goes to that church. So we were able to make that church connection and get her information and say, hey, is it okay if they contact you? And
That's
you should
encouraging.
really go and meet
Yeah.
with them some Sunday. They're really great, all this stuff. You just got to keep your eyes open and you got to be willing to take those opportunities that might even seem awkward or like God can't use me in this situation or there's not going to work. I don't really speak the language or these people are too busy or who's really going to say,
That
yes,
happens.
I want to follow
Yeah.
Jesus when some strangers stop you and just ask you point blank. Well,
That is cool.
times it happens. All right. So my other favorite thing that happened on this trip was, and this was definitely a divine appointment. I think God is
Those
the
plans
best
formed long
prankster
ago
in the
with
universe.
perfect
So he's setting
faithfulness.
up all these things that you don't know about that are going to happen, and they just hit you in the face. And what happened was on Sunday, some of our team members went to First Baptist Church of Glen Rose, and were able to go divide up into some of the Sunday school classrooms and share their testimony or talk about what we're doing here and invite people to come and join us. We do this sometimes on trips internationally as well. Remind them about doing Operation Andrew and the people they've been praying for. And hey, if you haven't had the opportunity to touch base with those folks or you kind of forgot to set up an appointment or whatever, there's still time. We can still do it. Let's be all in on this and we'll go and visit your friends with you this week or whatever. But Our friend and longtime participant, Margie Williams, who's been all over the world with IC and has been participating in all of our North America partnerships as well. She had the opportunity to share in a classroom where there was a Jewish lady. She's really funny and really kind. Her name is Nina. This Jewish lady is the only Jewish person that she knows of within a couple hundred miles or so. There's a very small town out in rural Texas, and there just aren't many Jewish people. And she has a long story about how she ended up moving
Yeah.
here, but she has found community with Christians, which I just think is really amazing.
Mhm.
And it's kind of because we're the next closest thing to Judaism, but also because they just make her feel so welcome there. That's why I just think it's amazing that this religious Jew is coming to a Christian church and hearing about the gospel and talking about the gospel and discussing it.
Mhm.
And, she knows a lot about what we call the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, and she's got a lot of insight from a Jewish perspective, which is really helpful for the Gentile Christian who
Yeah.
don't have that perspective. And so, anyway, she's very engaged in this class, and it's just she's just not a believer, yet, not a Christian yet in the Messiah. Well, all that said, while we were leaving the church, I was riding in the car with her and some other team members, and she mentioned that they had met this lady and that she had invited her to her Passover Seder at her home. I think the next night, and she was also doing one the night after that. I got really excited. I turned around like, oh my gosh, this is the best opportunity. This is so cool. You've got to
Yes.
go. And she wasn't sure she could
Yes.
go. It was so out of schedule. This wasn't planned for, but this is the kind of thing that we're definitely open to. Let the Lord move. This one God had handed her on a silver platter. And uh, Margie wasn't really sure if she should go or if she could or if it would be appropriate. And oh man, I just got so excited. Like, you've got to do this. This is the perfect opportunity. That's so
Mhm.
amazing. Do you know much about the Passover celebration? And she didn't. So I explained some things about the significance of the ritual, the elements, and how all of them to us very obviously point to Christ, even though they came about before
Yeah.
Christ came, or even some of these traditions have been implemented since. All of them still point so directly to Jesus Christ as Messiah and Lord. And so I thought maybe she would have an opportunity to share that, or at least have these things in mind while she goes through this
Please
year
take
and ask
me.
questions about them and point them out. The next day, she informs us that she's allowed to have a +1 to go. And I was like, please, please, please.
Yeah.
And I got to go. So the the secret here is I've actually been doing Passover Seders with my family for about 15 years. We do a Passover Seder from a messianic perspective, and the purpose is to point out all of these connections to Christ, right? But I wanted to go as a
Yeah.
learner and just to ask these questions and point out these
Yeah.
observations, like I was saying, because I I very rarely actually had a Passover meal with a Jewish
Yes.
person. So I was very curious to experience that, but also just thought, I just know God has had put this opportunity together. So we went over there as a team. Margie and I stayed, and there were, gosh, probably 12 or 13 other people there. And it was just fun. It was really laid back. It wasn't intimidating at all. It was fun. And Nina was the only Jewish person there. Uh, like I said earlier, she's the only one that she knows of that even lives in the area. But it was just amazing that everybody else at this Passover Seder was Christian except for her. And she even pointed that out and how funny it was and how like unkosher this really is to have exclusively Gentiles as guests at her Passover. But certainly we did get to have all these conversations about what these things mean, kind of the
That's so
gaps
cool.
that only Christ could fill, and that these symbols remind us so much of things Jesus said or did or who he is. And she was very open to all of those conversations, all of those questions. And I'd love to tell you that she broke down then and there and repented and claimed proclaimed her belief in Yeshua as Messiah. She didn't. But she did say, a Jew is a Jew, a Christian's a Christian. I'm a Jew by heritage, by ethnicity. It's just part of who I am. And Christians are Gentiles, and it's
Oh,
just two different
wow.
things. But the fact that you keep trying to convert me, that's how she put it. The fact that you all keep trying to convert me proves to me that you really love me and that you really believe this. And she said many other things kind of akin to that. And so I'm still praying
Hmm.
for her. She is aware that
Yeah.
this church is befriending her and loving her and being part of her life and inviting her into their
Hmm.
lives because they sincerely love her. And I just thought that was super, super cool. And, we asked a lot of questions. We pointed out a lot of things that maybe she'll think on
Hmm.
going forward. Okay, so one other really interesting element that she
Yes.
added to her Seder, which I'm just thinking, oh, she's getting closer. She's getting closer to realizing that Jesus is Messiah. Part of the ceremony is to have a seat and a cup for Elijah. And she had two different cups. One was, I think, a family heirloom, and one was either gifted to her or she got in the Holy Land, something like that. They were both cups that were made to be for this purpose, to be used in the Seder for the cup of Elijah. They're ornamented and painted, right? And she couldn't decide which one she wanted to use. So she used them both. And she admitted, this is not very kosher, but none of y'all even know that. Anyway, she couldn't decide which cup to use, so she used them both. And she decided that the second cup was the cup of
I just got
Jesus
goosebumps. I don't know about anybody else.
to honor the Christian friends that have come
Wow.
to the Seder. And she said she doesn't know why, but she's going to continue doing this from here on out.
Wow.
Some of us almost cried when she said that.
Christians don't often do that. It's not very common for Christians to participate in a Passover, but it's very special. And especially doing a messianic Passover where it points to Jesus is really cool. Caleb and I have actually celebrated Passover a few times just the past few years. And this year we got to have our church come and be a part of it. And anytime we do the messianic Passover. So the Passover that points to Jesus. And I encourage Christians to do this, to find a version online. And it doesn't have to be crazy. I mean, we don't get rid of the leaven in our house, shame, but I think it's just a really cool picture of Christ. And we've been able to even share or tell of the Passover and how that points to Jesus to other people too. And so, yeah, I think it's something that all Christians should be a part of at least once, because I think it's really a cool way to see how the Old Testament and New Testament connect to each other.
I totally agree. That's why we love doing it. And of course, I've studied more deeply into it and where some of these traditions come from in the interest of having conversations like I finally got to have. So I've looked into some of the origins of the Passover Seder, the modern Passover Seder, what elements were around during Jesus' time, like when he sat there with his disciples and said, "This is my body, this is my blood." Was that a particular cup? Was that a particular, eating of the bread and those sorts of things? But what's interesting is some of the elements of the modern Seder were definitely present when Jesus had his meal with his disciples, and some were added since. But in either case, all of those elements still point to him as Messiah. And I think that's a really cool thing, that even some of these traditions that have kind of been added after they lost their temple in 70 AD, those things still point to him. And I think they point to him even more clearly.
Yeah.
But to me, as a Christian, that makes so much sense because God was saying, you don't need this sacrificial system anymore. It's passed away.
Right.
You had a perfect lamb. And so I just think that's really awesome. But that was a cool opportunity to get to have some of those discussions with somebody who has celebrated it her whole life from a Jewish perspective and is now celebrating it with Christians and hearing that side of it.
Learn something.
We can sort of segue from there to our last segment where we want to talk about other opportunities that we have when we have North America partnerships and how they differ from our international trips, our international partnerships. How would you describe the difference kind of on a general level?
Yeah. So, of course, with our international trips, we're going to be going overseas, to different countries. And these, I think, can take a lot longer in their process. But you get to experience completely different cultures, and which you might get to experience in North America, not
Yeah.
excluding that at all. But our international partnerships, you get to really be immersed into a different culture that you might not have that opportunity in North America. And with our North American partnerships, these are a lot newer to us. These are something that we've been doing within just the past few years. They're just as important. And, especially here in America, there's a lot of very lost people here as well.
Yeah.
And so, North America or going overseas, every one of them is needed. For our international trips, you'll definitely need a translator. And so you can almost guarantee you're going to have some sort of language barrier whenever you're on an international trip. Having to work through a translator it can be challenging, but it also can be really cool learning how to work through a translator and seeing people hear the gospel for the first time, sometimes in their own language. And you also get to experience new foods sometimes that you've never
Yeah.
had before, which is always really fun. So, yeah, what are some things that you would say the main differences are between?
I think some of the main differences are some of the things you named. One, that when you're doing a North America partnership, you don't have to travel as far or as long, and it's less expensive
Right.
because of the flights, but also because of some of the other logistics. Sometimes we get lodging that is free or really cheap if it's at a camp, like a Baptist camp, or a guest house, a mission house that somebody has. So sometimes you save more money that way, but especially without international airfare,
Right.
they're a lot less expensive. The trips are a little bit shorter than international. So for some people, those two factors might make them easier to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a lot of time off or you don't have a lot of funds to contribute to going on internationally,
Yeah.
that might make it easier. But I would say, like we were saying at the beginning of the episode, that fundraising should not be the reason you don't get involved in missions, whether short
Exactly.
term or long term. God can pay the way. But if that is a concern, and if it frees you up to be able to go more easily or more often, that's definitely an advantage. On food, you mentioned food. I would say some people would consider that an advantage or a disadvantage based on whether or not you like experiencing international foods.
Yes.
If you're like me, you enjoy sampling the world, but some people do not like that, whether because their palate isn't that broad, you just don't like to try new or weird things, or it might be your stomach just can't handle different stuff.
Right.
So if that's you in the latter category, a North America partnership has an advantage for you because you're here, you can eat foods you're familiar with or get them easily. But of course, if you like to sample international food and you like other cultures, you do get to experience that sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
even on these trips, because we might be working with people from other backgrounds, nationalities, cultures, and languages, and you might get to experience some of their culture at their churches or at their homes, and things like that. So it is many times still a cross cultural experience here in the US.
Yeah. I think you do have the disadvantage of international travel is longer travel and jet lag are things that you have to deal with usually.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you've never had an opportunity to go on an overseas trip internationally, that you really need to take that opportunity because it is really life changing. The first time I went overseas, it really opened my eyes to lostness. It introduced me to missions more. And so it's definitely worth it to go on an international trip.
Oh yeah, I totally agree, and of course, I think that stepping outside of your comfort zone is a great thing to do, just as a person.
Mhm.
Great thing to do spiritually because you'll get to meet Christians in other parts of the world that
Yeah.
may be so completely different from your own culture here in the US that it seems like a different planet.
Right.
But they love the same Jesus, believe the same Bible, and many times their faith seems so much more vibrant and relevant to their daily lives than ours sometimes.
Mhm.
And so seeing that and being challenged and encouraged by that is so worth it. So worth stepping outside your comfort zone. Also, we're kind of called to do
Right.
that, to go beyond what we're comfortable with, to be stretched, to partake in the sufferings of Christ a bit for the sake of the gospel and to see God work through that. That's a hugely growing, stretching, encouraging thing for your walk with Christ. So I highly encourage anyone to do that.
Yep.
So both and then let's say do
Yes,
both. Do
both
both.
and do both. They're both important. Both have the opportunity to reach the nations and share the gospel.
Yeah,
But you have a lot of different cultural opportunities, in both. And so, yep,
yeah,
they're
and
both.
even might be other English speaking Americans that you work with that have a different subculture, like
Yeah,
cowboy churches. We worked with some cowboy churches on the Texas trip, and
there's a
there's a
culture.
whole culture there. Yeah.
Right. And we've had other trips where it was focused on reaching Mormons. And so even within the Mormon church, like that's a different culture,
Oh
and
yeah,
so I mean
definitely.
completely different religion. And other times we worked with Native Americans. That is a complete culture all its own. And even just being, if you're from the country and then you go to a larger city or vice versa, there are a lot of different cultures just to have a different perspective on. And
Oh yeah, people can have wildly different styles and preferences, of course, but they can have wildly different values
mhm,
and a very different worldview
yeah,
from what you have, and that might surprise you. But again, it's a good way to kind of stretch yourself and do some cross cultural ministry or just learning
yeah, just learn.
while you're going to share Christ with people. Learn how other people live and work and think and believe. We also have had partnerships working among Hispanic churches
Mhm,
and Brazilian churches
yeah,
in Destin, Florida. We went and did that. So they there can be a variety of different experiences, just depending on who the churches are that we're working with. Because just like we do overseas with end-to-ends or international partnerships, we're working at the invitation of churches,
mhm,
and so it's whoever that they're working with. We do encourage them to do cross-cultural ministry, however possible. A lot of times that means involving another church that's Romanian or Brazilian or Hispanic or whatever. And so you may have that kind of experience here. One other advantage of North America partnerships is that a lot of staff members and maybe even you, depending on if you drive there or fly there, might have your own car.
yes,
And this is something that I really do think gives a different dynamic, and that is higher flexibility to move around. Sometimes the reality is evangelism is hard and kind of scary
mhm,
for a lot of American Christians. And many of these North American partnerships have been the first work of its kind in a certain place.
right,
Maybe people in this church, or at least in these generations, have never done anything like this before. A concentrated, strategic, personal evangelism campaign. They've never done anything like that before, and it makes them uncomfortable. And so we give them plenty of training, plenty of encouragement, lock arms with them, but it's them that have to do the preparation and the work. And sometimes we get there and realize either they didn't really fully understand it, or just to be honest, didn't really fully grasp onto it and believe it.
mhm.
Understand that this really is for real what we're doing. We're praying for
We
people
are here.
going to the Lord, and we really truly are going with you to share the gospel with them.
Yeah,
And I want to give grace. A lot of times, I think the fact of the matter is they haven't seen it work before, and maybe it's because there just hasn't been all of this focus and strategy and prayer put on it, and they need to see a proof of concept.
yes,
So we can go, we can partner with them, we can encourage them, we can model what it looks like to share the gospel with people in conversational ways, and then they will grasp onto it and get it. But sometimes what that means is we'll show up, our teams will show up, the hosts have had time to prepare and just won't have many visits planned.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's fear, maybe it's the lack of experience, maybe it's just the timing, the time of year. Not a lot of people are home, the time of day. Where typically overseas we'll visit people all through the day, but here they're all working and whatever. But for whatever reason, we might not have a lot of home visit appointments, and we need to be more flexible and find something else to do. And so when we have our cars, we can communicate with each other, meet up. This group can go over here. This group can go over there. This couple of people can go over there, depending on what opportunities come up along the way.
Yeah.
And something that happened on, I think it's happened in Missouri, I know it happened on the Texas trip, is sure enough, some of the church members saw what was happening and realized, wow, this is really real. I really can go and share Christ with these friends that I've really wanted to for a long time. And they've been encouraged now because they've seen it actually happening. And they come up with new appointments or think of new people to go and visit. Sometimes it's family members they've been afraid to talk to about the gospel or whatever, or other neighbors or coworkers. And they can come up with those connections last minute, and we're able to move people around and go to the right places. And this Passover Seder story was one example of those. This is an opportunity that nobody had planned out or even thought of. It came about. We were able to do that because we had flexibility, we spoke the same language, and we had wheels. So that's a big advantage.
Yeah.
And typically what I've seen is we have a lot of our veteran goers, our veteran participants on these North America partnerships. And so if you've never gone on one before, this is a great first step because one, all the advantages we named, it's just kind of easier logistically to go. But also you're going to have people who have done this all over the world, hundreds, thousands of times, and they're very good at sharing the gospel in all sorts of different situations. They're very good at being flexible and taking things in stride and finding and making and taking opportunities. So they can coach you in that.
Yeah. And I think they love showing younger people the ropes. And I think that they get so excited whenever younger people are coming on the trips because they're seeing the next generation of people stepping up. And so they will take good care of you if you are partnered with them.
Yeah. Yeah. But all in all, whether you go internationally or here in the States, you got to have a good attitude because overseas, you're going to have things that are different, experience a little bit of culture shock, and you need to have a good attitude. Here in the States, you might be disappointed that this isn't quite how we planned it, or this isn't quite how I thought, and I don't exactly know what the schedule is every day. And you're having to take opportunities as they come. Just like with raising funds, just like with sharing the gospel itself, you got to have a good attitude.
Yep.
So that kind of brings things full circle to the beginning of our conversation that if God is calling you to go short term, go with us. Go to internationalcommission.org/go and sign up to go overseas or here in the States and start raising funds, trusting the Lord to provide, partnering with him in going, getting other people to partner with you and the Lord and sending you. And if you're feeling called to serve in missions long term, come and join our staff. We need more people to mobilize and to go and share the gospel. So if this sounds exciting to you, come on board. I'm telling you, if I was able to kind of start my life over and raise support to support a family of 5 kids in a full-time ministry, you can do it too.
Amen.
Because really the Lord can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to say yes. So don't let that scare you off. Have a good attitude about raising funds and serving the Lord. Any other words of encouragement?
Missions is for all of the Lord's children. So don't be afraid and see where the Lord is working and join him in that.
That's right. And he's working here. So let's go.
Yep.
Let's go. Well, let's continue equipping and enabling each other at home and abroad until everyone's had a chance to hear the good news of Jesus. Thanks for joining us today.